My name's George, and I edit the Imperfects. I grew up on Ngunnawal country, studied on Bundjalung country, and am now living and working on Wurundjeri country. On behalf of the Imperfects, we acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast was recorded, and we extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The rich storytelling history of the world's oldest living culture is what we proudly pay homage to when we share stories on the Imperfects.
Quick! Is anyone here a doctor? Yes, her name is Dr. Emily, and she's a psychologist. Please welcome to the Imperfects, our very own psychologist!
Those of you who have been counting the episodes and are like, hang on, hasn't Dr. M already done 8 episodes? And don't the Imperfects only do 8 episodes with Dr. M a year? To all of you people, welcome to episode 9 of Dr. M for the year. Wow, the never before trodden episode 9.
Who knows what might happen today? Yeah.
And for the first time in all year, you are coming live from Perth, not in the studio.
Yes, unfortunately I couldn't make it across at this late end of the year, but hopefully it will still all make sense even from being in this faraway land over here.
Yeah, yep. Hopefully.
I haven't said anything yet.
No, that'll do though. It's we wanted to get a work experience guy in today.
So what happened then to your voice at the end and when he tried to talk?
Hughes. This is it's the end of the year when Hughes literally melting in front of us, it's falling apart.
I tried to talk and then I couldn't. And anyway, I don't have anything to say at this point. I'm just happy to see him and I'm ready to learn.
Well, maybe. Let me jump in, Hugh. One of us must remain professional. Josh, do you have anything to say?
I don't really.
Please.
Any more Born Cinema anecdotes we could get?
Oh yeah, true. Good question.
I think Em and I are going to go out and write a book on the Born Cinema.
Oh, the history of.
Yeah. Yep. So I don't want to give away too much.
That'll be thrilling.
Okay, Dr. M. So
Yeah.
you spoke to Bridge and you said, I want to do another episode this year because you've got something that's been on your mind and you wanted to talk to us and the listeners about being at this late stage of the year.
I think this really could be this could be many, many episodes in of itself, but this is just, I guess, an opportunity to turn our mind towards taking good care of ourselves over Christmas and over the holiday period. And I really do feel like at this point it warrants us paying attention to what this time of year looks and feels like. And so there are kind of a number of things I thought we could talk about. I will kind of preface this that this is not a research-heavy episode. I'm really kind of looking at, how we can all talk together about paying attention to the important stuff and looking after ourselves. And I guess even just from my therapeutic approach, like knowing what feels important.
Yeah. No, great. Right. I said the same thing about my Year 12 English exam. It's not a research-heavy exam, just so you know, teachers. Just riffing. I totally get it.
From your therapeutic.
Yeah. Yeah, okay,
That
great.
sounds awesome.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Actually, I need to mention at the very start that I will be talking about Christmas, but I'm not necessarily meaning to be so specific in it being about Christmas per se, but I really want to reference here, obviously not everyone observes Christmas, so this is really a general discussion about the holiday period in general. So yes, there will be specific days that I might mention, but it can also have enormous relevance for any kind of significant family or religious holiday as well. Just wanted to give that as the first kind of heads up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
But I guess like really significantly, I think the holiday period and Christmas time comes with lots of expectation. It also comes with really mixed feelings, I think. And that can be one of, great kind of excitement, lots of expectations of family time, of connection, of love, of giving. But then there's also really being very realistic. It can be an extraordinarily stressful and at times distressing period for people.
Yeah.
Sort of like the time of the year. And, I'm Jewish, so I didn't grow up having Christmases at all. I mean, I do now with Jam and her family, and I love it. But I do know just anecdotally from friends and whoever that it's sort of, if you can sort of spend, if you don't get along with family members or whatever, or you don't, if you've had some issue in the past, you can kind of get through the year avoiding talking to people or, having any sort of interaction. And then this sort of like day is approaching, this like day of dread for some people, because it's like, oh, I'm going to have to confront this person and I don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're really spot on there, is that we can function in some ways to avoid our family of origin or to avoid certain relationships. But then there is this collective expectation that this is the time we come together. And look, for many of us, this may be a wonderful time, like really acknowledging straight up, of course, this can be really wonderful, but also it can be really, really tricky. And we get exposed in some ways to really our patterns of, or our learning history. So our family of origin, for example, this kind of birthplace of how we understand ourselves as individuals and how we understand ourselves in relationships to other people. So just kind of putting it really plainly, I think it can bring up a lot of anxiety, and I think it can bring up a lot of feelings like anger or resentment and trepidation potentially, definitely.
Yep.
So I guess what do we do with that? Kind of knowing that there is, there is this great possibility that we're going to be seeing family members or catching up with family friends, people that we don't see very often, and maybe there's a history of some difficulty or some challenge there.
I think also it's like for some people there is nothing going wrong, there's nothing troubling, but you can be sitting around on Christmas Day or with your family somewhere on a holiday and you feel pressure to have a really good time, and if you're not feeling that, you feel a bit anxious or you feel a bit, why am I, this is like I've spent the whole year going, just can't wait to get to the summer holidays. I'm here. Why am I feeling just extremely happy because it's summer holidays and my family here? I reckon that happens for a lot of people as well.
Absolutely. And there's so much stuff that ties into that too. And there is, again, this kind of collective cultural expectation that this is when we should feel happy and this is when I should feel connected and love and all that sort of stuff. I just don't think that that's actually the case. And I think the more we can talk about the fact that this is a challenging time, the more that we recognize this as a shared experience, that I'm not alone in this being hard. And then also we can look at, okay, so what do I do about that? What are the strategies I can put in place to take good care of myself, to be able to step off that kind of internal inner critic that's having a lot to say about this experience? So we can explore that as we go along, absolutely.
One of the things that I've found challenging about Christmas in the past is when you get together with people you love and care about, and it's not so much because I know that for some families and for some people it can be a very confrontational time, and it's not so much confrontation but more in periods of my life where I have had a perception that things that I haven't really done much or achieved much, or things haven't been going that well for me. And then everyone comes together and you hear about everyone's successes and great things that they're happening throughout the year. It just made me feel like more of a failure. And then I would retract more and more and more into myself and not really feel it would end up being I'm feeling I'm getting anxious now, even talking about it, because it's bringing back pretty strong feelings of going to these events where everyone, I really cared about everyone and they definitely cared about me and there was no animosity, but I just felt like this is I don't know, I was exposed to being a bit of a failure and couldn't fit in very well. Yeah.
Well, I think, thank you so much for sharing that, Josh. I really feel like that is such an experience that will resonate so much. I think it's actually pretty common, but again, we don't talk about it because it sits underneath the surface, this kind of sense of shame, really. The shame that I am not how I would like myself to be, and the fear of being found out almost.
Yeah.
And the consequence of that is that you make yourself smaller, or you retreat within yourself. And then in retreating, we then get exposed to more of that inner dialogue that tends to be very critical and comes with this like not-enoughness story.
Bingo.
I'm assuming, as you always do so beautifully, give us tools and what we can, for the Joshes of the world approaching Christmas. I mean, Josh has written a song this year, so you'll be fine. But
it's funny that it is. Well, it's a funny thing to say, but it is kind of true that I feel good about life now. So I'm not feeling those feelings. But I think for 10,
15 years. I probably did.
Yeah.
And yeah. So anyway,
I mean, it probably didn't help you with me talking about my cricket matches the whole time over Christmas.
Always taking fifers and
fifers. Am I right, Em?
Totally.
Yeah.
But I did,
Bloody cricket. Cricket.
did I get called Michelle's, which is quite funny.
yeah. I was going to say
Oh.
that, but I didn't want to.
What's a Michelle?
Michelle Pfeiffer.
Wow, that's great. I love that. I'm into cricket.
I think you've covered, in that little intro, you've covered off so many people there. I reckon so many people feel that it's a confrontational time and they spend a year avoiding family and family conflicts, and all of a sudden we're all together and alcohol's involved. So there's that. I think you've got people who feel the pressure to feel happy because it's the summer holidays and maybe they don't. And then you've got people who feel like it's really blowing up their I'm not enough story, and which Josh just mentioned. So I think
food and alcohol is a big thing as well. Like because you overeat so much, and there's alcohol involved, you just end up feeling. I know I do. It wasn't until recently that I'm like, it's actually that's making me feel like crap as well. Like because I'm overindulging in everything, and it's kind of like adding to this feeling of not enoughness.
Yeah.
It's like a cycle.
Yeah.
Can I add one more thing that happens? You, at a certain point, as an adult, when the kids are opening their presents, you go, oh, it's nowhere near as fun as you're an adult. And then you feel sad and you miss your childhood.
You okay here?
And you wish you were 10, like a Wimberley Road born.
And everything was okay, and there was mum there to look after
It was
me.
about me.
Em is not your psychologist, just remember.
So I guess if we zoom out, what I would perhaps like just put to you guys is like the major themes that show up around this time of year.
Yeah, okay.
And I think you've already kind of alluded to that anyway, Hugh, but we get, first of all, coming into December, from a physiological point of view, for a lot of us, depending on the kind of work you do or the family life you have, a lot of us are reaching a sense of exhaustion anyway. Okay, so there's like this stumbling to the finish line almost. So the body's already sitting in this state of depletion. And then we add in often having deadlines for work. So everyone needs things done by the 24th of December, for example. Or there is a pressure also, I don't know if you've had this experience, of the sudden need or imperative almost to catch up with people before Christmas, as though you're never going to see them again. And so there's these increasing expectations for your time, for your energy, in combination with a sense almost for a lot of people of burning out towards the end of the year. For those with kids or caring for younger people, we also know that they're getting really exhausted and they become overstimulated in this period of time too. So it's like this perfect storm in some ways towards lending ourselves to experiences of anxiety, of low mood, of exposure to this higher inner critic. So there are these conditions that are leading us towards this being actually a really stressful time. The other thing that we add on top of that is financial pressure, and I really don't want to minimize that at all, that this can be a really stressful period of time in terms of, how we pay for everything, how we create those family functions, how we show that we care potentially for other people. So there's that as another condition.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
I think the other thing, and that I notice, and we've talked about in the past with like the mental load and relationships, and I think it often falls on women in heterosexual, or the mum in a heterosexual relationship, but to organise it all and to have all the presents bought and to have the perfect Christmas day and the perfect when you're having everyone around on the day, have all the right food, all the right everything to go perfectly, and feeling all that pressure that they've got to make Christmas the most special day ever. And I'm sure it's felt by both people in the relationship, but I think it's probably pertinent, given that we've talked a bit about mental load this year, that I think it probably more often than not falls to the woman in the relationship, in a heterosexual relationship.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. There's an incredible example of that exact thing. For those who've seen a TV show called The Bear, there's an episode in season 2 which is like one of the most stunning examples of like Christmas Day family trauma pretty much. Like not in a good way, but just like in an incredibly seems like a very accurate, heartbreaking way to see how that pressure affects, in this case, the mother of the household.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an incredible episode. And you feel it really viscerally. And I think that that's in some ways really representative of that this is genuinely an actually stressful period of time, but it's layered down with an expectation that this should feel really good. So that's a really tricky thing. And like one of the other things I was going to mention there, like really was in relation to what you said, Josh, around these expectations and the tendency towards perfectionistic standards really get activated here too.
Yeah.
So, you know, how this should look, how this should feel, what we should be doing. So it's like it's littered with shoulds. And with that comes this stressful striving. Absolutely.
Reminds me a little bit as well of just when you go on a holiday. Just generally a lot of this stuff does apply as well to just not even this time of the year, but just generally going on like a family holiday or holidays with your partner, and the expectations that are placed on that versus the reality and the stress of organising, and whether you got kids or no kids, it's just like the expectations you set on, like, oh, you've booked this thing 3 months in advance and you're looking forward to it, so much pressure on to deliver, and then you're there and something's not happening that you expected, or the weather's not good, or you're in a bad mood or whatever. Anyway, I just sort of point that out as well. Yeah.
I mean, holding these perfectionistic tendencies, there's an unrelenting standard there, and it's actually very difficult to meet. So when we don't meet those standards, the obvious consequences, feelings of disappointment, or not enoughness. Yeah. So if we kind of imagine this lead up to Christmas with all of these things happening, and then we lay on family relationships, friendships, the interpersonal dynamic, what sits also alongside that, and it would be really remiss of me not to mention this, that for a lot of people, I would say probably at some point in time in your life, there will be really profound and strong feelings of grief that show up around Christmas time.
Is that what I was saying before?
Yes, actually, that is a form of grief, is, you know, when you reflect on the fact that in childhood, you know, for you, Hugh, that was a time filled with joyfulness and innocence and excitement and no pressure. And so then as you progress into adulthood and there is this inevitable feeling of, responsibility, of like the responsibilities of being an adult, that feeling is not there anymore. And so, of course, that can expose you to this feeling of loss, of grief.
Yeah, but as I said that, I realised you're probably talking about something a little bit more serious, which is like people potentially have lost someone, and then Christmas is a time they have very fond memories of being with that person.
Yeah, and so there are lots of incarnations of grief, and we've not really done, an episode on that in particular, and I really would like to do that justice in some way. So this is just really kind of touching on it now, but grief comes in lots of different forms. A loss comes in different forms. So yes, there's a grief that shows up in terms of what I used to have as a child, but then there's also obviously the experiences of the grief of losing someone, and that this time can heighten that profound loss for people. And so that is a really tricky thing to navigate, I think. So I really want to kind of mention that as something that is also, can be a really big struggle for people at this time of year.
It's almost like this time of the year, particularly, I guess, a Christmas Day scenario, it almost represents a family photo. And then, when someone isn't there who has been there forever, the gap is so noticeable. And it's almost like, I mean, sometimes as obvious as like a chair at the dinner table or something. And it's just, it just seems so, the fact that they're not there is like heightened.
Absolutely. It also ties into other experiences of loneliness as well. And they're not the same thing, obviously, but Christmas, New Year's, that whole holiday period, I think also really can expose us to maybe the depths of loneliness that we might be experiencing that the busyness of the year can almost protect us from. And the loneliness can be, very like obvious in that maybe I don't have people that I spend that holiday period with. But also it can be a feeling of loneliness and grief that on this particular day that we share as a family, I might be the one sitting there that doesn't have a partner. And I might be surrounded by people, but I also feel a real deep sense of loneliness in that space. And similarly, you know, you may be someone that is in the midst of experiencing infertility or having experienced any kind of perinatal loss and or just generally trying for a family. So this may be a particularly hard time, you know, also for you in that space. And so again, it's just really acknowledging how hard I think these periods of time can be, to highlight perhaps parts of our lives that feel really hard or parts where there is a suffering. And that's why I guess I wanted to do this today, because I think it really, we want to kind of bear witness to that and also to think about, okay, well, when this is happening, how do I look after myself and how do I want to relate to this maybe even in a different way? And also really kind of giving a big shout out here to single parents and also really to the very large number of separated families navigating and negotiating what this period looks like, I think can be extremely hard. And, you know, I won't go into great depth about that today, but really just acknowledging in there, giving yourself the space and the compassion and the self-care to navigate this, you know, pretty tricky time.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like there's been a lot of people listening who feel very seen at the moment.
I feel like Christmas needs a complete rebrand, or summer holidays for adults. It's just, we all just agree it's a really crap time. And then it might surprise you, and that's great.
Set the expectation. Yeah, let's get some really depressing Christmas movies happening.
Just like, oh no, it's nearly summer holidays. This is bad.
Oh no.
This is going to be bad.
I wish we could just skip it and just keep working.
Yeah, so we do that, and then if it turns out to be good, you're like, well, that was nice.
Didn't expect that.
Yeah.
So I thought, kind of having said all of that maybe we might just kind of come back to what's in our control and looking at self-care as almost like a non-negotiable at this part of the year, which is really tricky because it's usually the first thing that falls off the wagon when we get busier and busier. And, you know, Josh, you mentioned kind of the overindulging, so the eating more and the drinking more. One of the biggest practices that we can do in terms of looking after ourselves at this time of year is to maintain as best we can those routines that we've already established during the year. And so, like, these are the things that are important to me in the work that I do. And it's not about, and I really want to make this clear, this is not about weight loss. This is not about the health in the body even, but around the importance of exercising and moving and continuing to move as a way of really managing this stress response that's here.
And more than just like moving quickly between Kmart and Target furiously on Christmas Eve.
Yeah. So, and look, yes, look, for me, definitely exercise is that kind of non-negotiable. Meditation for me is also non-negotiable, so it has to be done every day. This is kind of part of my self-care, for example. But really taking a moment to think about what are the non-negotiables in terms of how I care for myself. And how do I ensure that even part of that is sustained over this period of time that is not usually structured. So we move out of routine really typically. How do you make sure that I get some movement in the day? And also, how do I start to monitor maybe some of the behaviors that can lend itself to more stress? And this is obviously drinking and maybe to a lesser extent overindulging in food, but the drinking is there's a real difficulty with this at this time of year, I think.
It's not even like when you get to Christmas Day, you've already had
Weeks
probably
of,
2 weeks worth of not as much sleep and being hungover at work, and but you excuse it all because it's Christmas, or it's the summer holidays. So,
and it is fun. Like it is those catch ups and those work things. I think a lot of people
Time
do
to
have fun.
Socialise with work people and
but I find, like, I guess my whole history of drinking and going out is that it took me a very long time to realize the toll it was having on me on the times I wasn't drinking and stuff. Like that accumulated, the accumulated cost for me because the fun was so fun as well.
Yeah. And look, I really don't want to be like the fun police here and say, don't overdrink. But can we be a bit more realistic about it? So with the number of events that there are, do we have to drink at every single one of them? You know, can you sit some of it out? Can you drive to some events? So really kind of like instead of moving into like this hope to cope kind of attitude, actually standing back and looking at and maybe even discussing with your partner or the people in your life, you know what, I'm going to drive to this event and make sure that this is something that, you know, I can still engage with being sober. Of course you can. Does it have to be every single one, basically?
Yeah. I mean, there's never been a better time to not drink because there are some good non-alcoholic beers and things out there now. It's genuinely like some of them are actually really good.
Also very expensive activity.
It is.
Yeah.
Especially at the moment.
Yeah. And if you think about the number of events that occur in December and how much that is costing just in terms of, you know, that kind of engagement, then that's adding another stress to that as well.
I think it also increases the enjoyment of if you're able to select and go like, all right, I'm going to have fun at these ones, have a drink, and not at these ones. I feel like you have more fun at the ones you commit to.
You can look forward to something.
Yeah, rather than finding yourself a few weeks in and going, oh, I was really looking forward to that dinner, but now I just can't be bothered because I'm exhausted and grumpy. That's just speaking for myself.
Be more selective.
Yeah.
Rather than it being the default. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's going to play into also, you know, what resources you have available to you physically, like for the next day, for example, what you've got on for the next week. That's an important factor. Look, I'm sure most people would be aware that consumption of alcohol impacts upon the quality of our sleep really significantly, and the sleep is so fundamental to our well-being and our mental health. So they go hand in hand. If there are things we can do to mitigate that, then that's an awesome step towards taking good care of yourself, basically. So just keeping alcohol in mind. And I think that, again, kind of coming back to where you can put in routine, so where you can exercise, where you can still move, like even if it's, I don't know, if you've got kids, like going with them on a bike ride, or it doesn't have to be the traditional form of exercise you might do, for example. But how do I ensure that I'm getting outside and that I'm moving? I think that feels important. So that's like the self-care stuff.
Can I just pitch an idea for a self-care thing to do this holiday season? So we all know Kris Kringle, right? Usually at workplaces where you pick a name out of a hat and you get someone that you have to buy a present for. What if the agreement is that everyone you agree on a price, so say it's like, you know, $50, and you buy something for yourself that is self-care related. So everyone gets something for themselves to look after themselves, knowing lots of presents are going to be given here and there, but you actually go, you know, I really want a massage. And so you get the thing that you know will be good for you rather than like giving someone like a candle.
Yes. That's brilliant.
Unless the candle is the self-care that you need.
Well, if you want the candle, bloody buy a candle. But the point is, it's like if it's self-care, it's sometimes hard, you know, you end up buying it at the last minute. But if you're like given if you're going to be spending the money anyway, you're being given permission to spend the money on you for something that is really, so that's the rule. It has to be self-care related.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we're showing up we're actually kind of caring for ourselves and caring for others.
Yeah.
Which is pretty special, I think.
Haven't thought of a name for it yet. I'm trying to think of a pun that sounds like Kris Kringle, but haven't got to it yet. Kris Single is the thing I'm closest to, but it's not quite right. Anyway, get back to you.
So as part of that self-care, I should also mention, you know, where can you say no to events? Like, do you have to go to everything? Equally, do we have to catch up with everyone?
I love the thought of that.
There he is.
I'm saying no.
I'm staying at home and going to bed before 10 o'clock. That sounds exciting.
So like realistically thinking about, you know what, this relationship is not going to stop because I don't see them at Christmas time. You know, do I need to see everyone? Do I need to do everything? How do I look after and protect my energy here? Yep.
Yeah, love it.
I think protect my energy is a really awesome saying to have in the back of your mind throughout this whole holiday period, protect my energy, because it's something I think you feel like I need to exhaust my energy because this is my chance to be social. I reckon protect my energy to protect my mental health is a very good tagline to have yourself for the break. Well, certainly for me anyway.
It's almost like
Yeah.
almost like treating Christmas Day as like you're playing in the grand final. And it's like, I know I'm playing in the grand final on the 25th.
Yes.
I have to be in peak physical and mental condition. I have to prepare myself for that.
I have a couple of practice matches in the lead up, but
Exactly. I'm just going to be in shape, but I cannot ruin this day. This is my opportunity to really show up.
That's
Exactly.
really good.
So the other thing in there is looking at how do you start your day? And I think we could say this particularly even for Christmas Day, like Santa aside, can you start the day with a pause before moving into the rushing? So when I said I wasn't going to be research heavy, there is a piece of research here that feels really relevant, and that is that I know, and that is that when we can set an intention for the day that is informed by our values, that is there's a protective function of that for your resilience, for your like sense of wellness in the body. So what I mean by that is setting an intention would be holding an attitude to frame your day. So I might wake up and say, today I would really like patience to be my attitude for the day. And so I can hold this in the back of my mind as an attitude to bring towards all the things that I'm engaging in today. So we can even just say it quietly in the mind, even just feeling it in the body, like so this opportunity to slow down. And the research suggests that this intention setting is really, really good for preventing burnout. And there's no other better day really to practice this than on a day like Christmas, for example.
Amazing.
I get stressed on Christmas Day because we often host it just because our house is sort of in the middle of everyone. And I just have this thing in my head that the lawn has to be perfect for everyone. Like there cannot be leaves on it. And the garden has to just look perfect. And I just want everything to be perfect. And apparently I get this from Mum, but I will get so stressed just before everyone comes over. And Penny and I just stop talking because I'm just so stressed. And so we have this whole tension. Well, and it's my fault 100%, but I'm just like, if she's saying, do you reckon you could do something, which to be honest is probably much more needed, like get the food out or something, and I'm picking up, I'll see a leaf fall from the tree and I'll run out and grab it. And wow.
Yeah.
Like I really
Shoots it out of the air.
But if I was to set an intention of being helpful and practical or something, or like actually prioritizing what really matters, or prioritizing the importance of whatever I come up with, I can see how that would really help.
As a quick poll, just while we're talking about hosting, it's sort of nothing to do with this, but I'd just be interested to see what you guys think. If you're hosting an event, like a dinner or a Christmas Day, would you prefer your guests to be exactly on time or 20 minutes late?
Oh,
Late.
20 minutes late.
Exactly.
Late every
Em?
time.
What would you think? What would you say?
Yeah, late, definitely.
Yeah.
This is
Definitely not early.
What?
But then we all stress about being on time.
Exactly.
Don't we? Well, I don't.
Exactly. No, but people do.
Yes.
People's like, we can't be late. But actually, the truth is that everyone wants you to be late.
Just a little bit late.
And everyone
Just a
wants you
bit.
to be late because you're stressing at home trying to get everything done.
Yep.
And I think that really highlights, again, this kind of perfectionistic standard and also these kind of expectations of tradition, of carrying over certain traditions from previous years, from your family of origin, that things need to be a certain way. But like the really fascinating thing is that, like, and even in all the episodes that we've done together, the thing that matters is the relationship. No one remembers the perfect food that was there on the table or like the leaves on the lawn, but we get so fused with that as that indicating something really significant. So, this striving, like if things aren't perfect, what does that mean for me? And that's where we get this kind of exposure there to this kind of inner critic. But if we can even like have this in mind, like, okay, so do I need to do all the traditions? Do I need to have everything this way? Because if I don't, what's the cost? If I do, what's the cost? The cost of striving for perfectionism means that I might be more irritated. I've got a lot of stress in the body. Maybe I'm actually missing out on moments of connection here.
I found that attending Soph's family Christmases was an interesting experience for me in the form that I was always so wedded to the traditions that we had as a family I'm like, if I go to it, if the first time that I was like, I'll be away for Christmas with her family and not going to my family one at all, how will I enjoy Christmas because I won't have all the traditions there? And it was a really freeing experience to see that being around people who do it differently and realising how much fun you still have. It sort of was a bit of a light bulb moment that although I really treasure the traditions, they don't have to be there for the day to be wonderful and special, and trying to borrow a bit of that energy into I haven't hosted a family Christmas, but maybe one day I will, of trying to be a little less like aim for them, but if they don't work or they don't get there, knowing that it's not going to be the end of the day.
Yeah. And that you can have flexibility.
Yeah.
There's some freedom in that flexibility, absolutely. And so, we can hold on to the traditions in some ways, but also can we make new ones? You know, can we, instead of having to do like 20 main meals, can we do 4? See what happens. And almost like really kind of looking at, okay, how do we make this an imperfect Christmas? I was actually talking to my mum the other day about a Christmas we had like 10 years ago, about the time that my dad set fire to the turkey and doused the turkey in pool water to put the fire out. And then we all ate the like chlorine turkey.
Oh, great.
And the thing is like that like those memories, like that was completely like an absolute disaster. Like this was like in terms of culinary experience, but
Chlorine turkey.
Yep. He was consequently named Bernie the turkey, but that's another story. But it's those memories of like these imperfect experiences that they're imbued with laughter and connection. And, if we'd had a perfect turkey, I would not remember it. I would not remember it, and it would not feel funny or loving or anything like that. So why are we holding so tightly on to these expectations about it needing to look and feel perfect?
Why? Well, why are we? I feel like
Can I
we
have
should
an answer?
Oh, yeah.
My gut feeling is that I think about that for some people, they feel like the thing that they can bring to the day is a perfect turkey. Like I might not be able to be the life of the party or the person who's creating the energy or the connection, but what I can do, I'm a good cook and I can put a bloody good meal on the table. But if I don't do that, I bring no value at all.
And that hits at the core of my worth as an individual is tied to something else.
Turkey.
Yeah.
In every case.
Yeah. And
All year round.
It's always a turkey, isn't it? That's what I find. It's always a turkey.
I'm the turkey man.
And so we really want to zoom out there and look at, okay, so if I only matter because I can provide this food, or my value is only tied up in this particular skill, this is there's a lot of suffering in that. And in some ways the core work that we want to get to is knowing that I am exactly who I need to be in the absence of all of my skills, in the absence of my job. I matter because I am me. But it's at Christmas time, in holiday times, all these old patterns of thinking, these core beliefs, they get really activated. We're flooded with triggers. So it's a real challenge to step off that kind of automatic pilot of thinking. Absolutely.
Wow.
Awesome.
So good.
Yep.
Oh, Merry and Perfect Christmas.
That's so good, Em.
I should really mention what to do in the space of grief and in the space of loneliness, and also sometimes with difficult family relationships as well.
Yeah, great.
So just first of all, I really encourage you as best you can to be holding a sense of compassion to what is a really hard experience at this time of year if you've experienced significant loss, or even if it doesn't feel like it's like so significant, even if there's just this one sense here of there being a loss or a grief. When it comes to the actual Christmas period, for some people exposed to grief, it may not be the actual day per se that is in of itself really hard. It can actually just be the period of time. So the lead up to Christmas, for example, we get exposed to so many images, social media, Christmas decorations, and that time of year, in the space of grief can feel very overwhelming to the body. So again, self-care and self-compassion becomes really paramount. So look, in terms of working with grief, particularly with the day, for some people, particularly when it's been, maybe there's a close proximity to the loss, I really don't think that there is anything wrong with, for a short period of time, taking yourself out of those traditions. It may actually just feel really too overwhelming to, for example, attend a Christmas Day function. So what does it look like to actually have an entirely different day? Does it mean maybe you go out for lunch somewhere, maybe you even go away for Christmas Day? So really kind of changing this up in some ways to really acknowledge that this does feel very painful. And I don't wish to suggest that we need to avoid any triggers because, as you know, like from what I've spoken about, avoidance is the enemy. But in the shorter term, like giving yourself permission to not have to do that necessarily. So going somewhere else, doing something new, and giving yourself permission for that to be the case. Alternatively, it may be that the Christmas Day is this really important opportunity to really bring in that lost person into the family. One of the things that I think really exacerbates grief is when it's not spoken and when other people don't speak about the person that's passed. And so if you're sitting there and having lost someone, whether it's, a parent or a child, and that person that has passed is not mentioned at all, I think like that just absolutely exacerbates this sense of loneliness, of grief and of loss. And so for me, let's bring in this person that we don't have anymore. Is it that you honor them by a toast? Is it that you honor them by cooking their favorite meal? Is it that we go and share a story around the table, or we bring photos in? So really kind of bringing to light, this is this person that was really important in our lives. And even though they have passed away, my relationship to them does not end. I think that feels really important.
That's really nice.
That's beautiful.
But again, obviously if you have your own therapist and you're doing your own work on that, please, do the work that you want to do with your therapist on that. But checking in with what is going to feel okay for you around this, what is going to make it feel manageable and important. So that's kind of that, briefly addressing that aspect. In terms of loneliness, my first initial suggestion around this is volunteer work and contribution. So when is there an opportunity for me to get out there and, particularly around Christmas time, doing any work with around poverty and homelessness, any marginalized groups, how do we get out of this sense that maybe I don't have a family to connect to, but how can I connect with other people and how can I show up and show care for others as well? So I think that can be something that can be really helpful to shift us from this state of loss into a state of contribution. The other thing is when we're experiencing loneliness within a family or within the group that we're in at the time, as I've kind of mentioned in the past, just naming it, naming that, gosh, this day feels hard for me. I'm noticing I'm feeling lonely. So we start to name it, which then prompts more connection with other people as well.
Yeah, because you probably find that you're not the only lonely person at the table.
100%. Yeah, definitely. So we start to name this experience, and when we name it, we can sometimes get a bit of distance from that as well. And the other thing I want to mention with respect to loneliness, if that's particularly exacerbated in a family state, is putting in place opportunities to spend time with the family you choose. And what I mean by that is your friends. So, maybe you make the commitment to go to the family lunch, and that might feel hard, but checking in with or cultivating an opportunity to spend time with the family you choose, and they can be friends as well.
Yeah. When I was younger, there used to be a Christmas Eve tradition that a lot of the people of my age group would go to this particular pub. And it became the thing that you do the night, the Christmas Eve. And because I never celebrated Christmas, it was the thing that I looked forward to because I didn't, I was doing nothing on Christmas Day. most of the time. And so that was like this thing that was like, oh, this is where I get to see. It's like a good tradition every year that was like just for friends, like just for, for us, it was just for the younger people. But that did feel really, it was really nice because I felt like I could participate in some way in Christmas, even though I didn't celebrate Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it wasn't really about Christmas. It was about our relationships and our connection. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It was about getting smashed on illusion shakers.
So then it kind of brings me to difficult relationships and this anticipation that we're going to be engaging in relationships that might feel hard or unwanted, perhaps. And so I might even kind of start off with something that I think can step us out of that even just for a second, and that is the practice of gratitude, and Christmas and this holiday period being a particularly useful time for us to write letters. When you're giving gifts, like, can I step into this gratitude letter here? Like, this is exactly what Christmas is about connection and about this kind of sense of gratitude for the relationship I've had with you for this last year. Mm-hmm. So even if you wanted to take a moment before you go to an event to write that card, I think that can even kind of soften us into a greater sense of gratitude for the relationships that I do want to cultivate and I do want to value. So that's one thing. The one thing I want to mention about family relationships is based on family systems theory, and that is this idea that, obviously we all exist. We exist in a family, and within the family there are roles that we all play and that we continue to play kind of across our lives, and that when you, like, as you emerge into adulthood and you kind of become independent, you might go off and kind of do your own work, or find that in other relationships you don't enact the same patterns you did in your family of origin. So then you're an adult and you're independent and you have romantic relationships and friendships and they feel good. But then when you come back into the family, it's like we revert to the old patterns that we experienced as children, and they play out in exactly the same way.
I feel like everyone in this room nodded their head simultaneously.
Yeah. And it's actually this concept called homeostasis, and that is that each member of the family in some ways works hard to ensure the same status exists within the family. And that's why there's a really big resistance to people changing. We don't like it when people change within a family. And so people will try, like, that's when conflict can arise, obviously. It becomes more difficult. So the biggest thing, I guess, for me is, how do I hold on to my healthy adult self when I return to the childhood family of origin?
This is huge.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
What's the answer? Hopefully it's just a simple
I'm mentally typing the exploding head emoji.
I'm thinking maybe we could tease to the next season. This is episode 1 of the next season. We'll see you next year.
And that's next Christmas.
We've done a cliffhanger with not getting any skills. So this is the really tricky work. But I'll just give you an example of what this might look like. It might be that, this is a very simple example, but it might be that in your family of origin, you might, this is very gendered, but I think this might resonate. You might, as the female, as the daughter, might be inclined to go into the kitchen and help your mum. Again, this is very stereotypical. Go in the kitchen to help your mum while the boys are out at the barbecue having a beer, or the boys are doing something else. How does that kind of make sense so far?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Whereas you, as the son in your other adult relationships, may not be doing that kind of pattern. Mm-hmm. So you may not be enacting that pattern outside of the family, but when you return to the family home in particular, that's those same old patterns show up. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we also then get exposed to the same old patterns of resentment, of frustration, annoyance, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Back to drinking beers with your dad like when you were 5.
Yeah. So the first is, like, before, like in this kind of lead up to Christmas, can you take a moment to reflect on, what is the role I play in my family? So getting a sense as to, like, what are all these roles that we have in our family, and is there a function to that role still? So can I let go maybe of some of those old patterns? Can I re-enter this family home? Maybe even just having an awareness as a start that this is this family pattern here.
Feels like whenever I've done anything which goes against the so-called norm of like what the roles are within the family, it feels very vulnerable. Like it feels like this huge act to
Like you're
do.
making a big statement.
Yeah, like
No, I'm going to help in the kitchen.
yeah, it's like, look at me. And then everyone's like, oh, okay, someone's breaking up the patterns.
What is he doing mixing a salad?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Yeah.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
like as simple as that it can be. Yeah.
And this is that kind of concept of homeostasis. There's like a really strong aversion to this pattern being different, this pattern changing. So first things first is like checking in with what is this pattern that's here for me and my family. And then, how do I hold on to this internalized sense of a healthy adult in my life? And that might look like you taking a few grounding breaths before you go into the house. It may be these are very off the cuff stuff. And this could be, again, like a whole episode here. But how do you slow down enough to step off of this reactivity, this automatic pilot? It can be very simply you just taking a long exhalation, saying to yourself, I'm noticing here is family stuff. So using this observing part of you, oh, that's curious. I can see this here. And then maybe that moves you into non-reactivity. Maybe that means that you don't jump into that conversation in the same way, or maybe you do something differently. Maybe it's you take yourself outside. Maybe it's you go and hang out with the kids for a little bit. Let's think about the opportunities for pausing to step into reflection rather than reactivity.
And also, I guess the other part of that is to actively, if you spot someone doing this, like trying to change, it's like actively supporting them or like giving them a wink that like, you heard Dr. M as well, just to rather than leave them hanging, because it does feel like such a big deal sometimes when you do something like that. Yeah.
The other thing is too, at Christmas time when there's alcohol and exhaustion, we can often get exposed to much more opinionated discussions on politics, on religion, on social issues. And you might know going into this event that old mate Uncle Peter over there has very strong views that are vastly different from my own. And I know he is going to be making them known at Christmas time. If, like, standing back, if we know this person has not changed in his 60 years of living, why do I want to get engaged in this pattern that only causes me a lot of angst, a lot of distress? So in those moments where he starts kind of standing up with this particular view, can you take a breath and go, aha, here is Uncle Pete's story showing up. Okay. This is not an issue for me. This is an issue for him. So how do you take a step back and not get, like, it's very compelling when you hear views that are really vastly different to yours. It's very compelling to get engaged and hooked into that. But the question I really want to ask in there is, how helpful is it for me, particularly if this is a person I only see once a year? Can I let it go? Can I put it on? I'm sorry. I was just telling my son the other day about the idea of letting thoughts come and go. And he came up, he's really into Halloween at the moment, and he came up with the idea of putting it on the ghost train. He's like, Mum, I put the thought on the ghost train and I went into the ghost house.
Yeah, that works.
It's good.
I was like, that's awesome. I was very excited. And then it didn't work the next day. So that's fine. But can we let them go? So we can stand back and observe, here's Uncle Peter, put him on the train and let him go. Maybe he'll come back again, but that's okay, and just let it go.
Or maybe to make it like a Christmas theme and also this episode theme, you could just think to yourself, what a turkey. And then just,
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah.
thinking someone's a
Yeah.
turkey is funny. You can lull to yourself and then
What a chlorine turkey.
what a chlorine turkey that person is, and then move on.
Exactly. Yeah. And of course, this requires you really regulating your own reactivity. So, like, how do you regulate this, for a lot of people, this kind of feeling of rage or this like really strong feeling of anger and resentment? So how do you take good care of your body in those moments? to notice, like, okay, here's anger rising. Okay, I'm noticing this happening. How helpful is it for me to stay engaged with this person? If it's not helpful, let's take ourselves out for a moment and turn ourselves and really like paying attention to the relationships in the room that are important to you. So let's go to that person. Let's spend more time with that person. Uncle Pete can go and do his thing over there.
Yeah.
How does that kind of make sense?
Is getting engaged in a fight with that player going to help me win the grand final? Probably not.
Yes.
Steer clear.
Yep.
Just keep your eye on the ball.
Yes, keep your eye on the
goals.
ball. And that would
Or the
be
turkey.
keeping your eye on your values. So this again may show up in the morning if you were kind of doing some intention setting. So checking in with your values today. How do I want to show up to my values? Is engaging with this person really helping me create the life that's worth living for myself in this moment? Maybe not. I'm not saying that we shouldn't stand up for what we believe in by any means, but just like really checking in with how helpful is it for me to do this? Is my energy spent somewhere else better, basically? How do you look after yourself in those difficult situations?
Unreal.
Just a quick question. Did your dad throw the turkey in the pool, or did he get a bucket of pool water and throw it on the turkey?
Great question.
He got, I think it might have been in a glass even, or I think it must have been a bucket. He did not throw the turkey in the pool.
That's what I was. That's what
Fished it out with one of those long nets.
Ready?
Plunked it on the table.
Not the most important element from today, but I couldn't stop thinking about it that whole time.
Not in the deep end, it can't swim.
That is so unbelievably helpful. That is just.
Yeah, thanks, Em.
That's a pleasure.
I think that'll really make this holiday season a lot easier for a lot of people.
Yeah, look, this is just really a heads up to really take good care of yourself. Take good care of yourself and pay attention to the relationships that are important to you, I think, at the end of the day.
Love it. Love
Brilliant.
it. Thank you, Em.
What an app.
We are so lucky to have you on this podcast. We really are. It's we are so grateful for everything you've given us this year. 9 episodes, as Ryan said at the start, meant to be 8, 9. So happy it was 9 after what you've helped us with today and helped everyone with. We get so much feedback about how incredible you are. I know it always surprises you to hear, but it comes in thick and fast. We love you. Thank you so much for everything you've done.
Thank you so much.
And while I'm doing thank yous, I might.
Because it's technically the season finale.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should have said that actually. Yeah, just to give context. This is the last episode pretty much of the year.
I mean, having said that, if you remember last year, we did do a special Christmas episode with Santa Claus, and next week there will be another special episode.
Extremely special guest.
Yeah,
So keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, season finale. Who else do we thank?
But we won't do the thank yous while that person's here. So we might just do them now. So we've got a list of people to thank here. People who have had a lot to do with this podcast that get no credit at all really whatsoever. So we've toured this year and it's been a wonderful, but meeting the people listening to this podcast has been, I know for the 4 of us that has been a real highlight, meeting the people who listen to us. And so to Live Nation, who manage our tour, to Bianca, who did so much work on our live show. We thank everyone from Live Nation and Bianca, especially to Beck, who manages Ryan and myself, but also just does so much for this podcast. We thank you, Beck Sutherland.
Tony as well from Live Nation.
Yes, who does ticketing, which honestly,
important.
What a job.
Yeah.
To the other people who work very directly on this podcast, to Jamison Moore, who edits M's episodes. Ryan, your partner, Jam, has done
Wonderful person.
Wonderful person. Your episodes are so incredibly popular, Em, and I know it's you, and it's also the work that Jam does on them as well. To Andy, who shoots us, not literally, obviously.
He just keeps missing, so we're still here.
Luckily, we've hired a stormtrooper. Little Star Wars deep cut for.
Oh, very, very good.
Well, don't know about the second very, but thanks.
Every time I look at the videos, like, gosh, they're so well shot, and that's Andy and Josh working together on those. So well done to you both. And of course to George Martin, who
not the Beatles producer.
No. George Martin, the Beatles producer? Yeah.
Well, no, not. Oh, well, thanks for him to producing the Beatles, but this is a different George Martin.
Yeah.
This is our George Martin.
Actually, really important to make that clear.
Yeah.
I think he's better. Our George Martin's better. George,
I think so.
George edits our episodes. He does all our social media, and he does all of it as a lovely, 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 gorgeous man.
Yeah.
It's true. True. Absolutely true.
To iHeart, ARN, who are our dad.
You can call
Mum
them
and dad?
Call them our
Mum-
parents. Yeah.
Parents.
Yeah, mum and dad. To our parents, to our not actual parents, but to our podcast parents, and Corey, who is our
Dad.
I was going to say grandpa, but yeah, I think dad.
I think you'd appreciate dad or brother.
Yeah,
probably.
my brother, considering he's younger than me. Yeah, I think
Is he?
so, yeah.
Okay, well, there you go.
But to Corey and Claire from iHeart, who are our actual kind of podcast mum and dad, but they're not together. But it does matter.
Yeah, separated parents.
So, yeah.
Never.
Don't know why everything has to be
but they
family.
were never together in the first place.
No,
but
they
yeah.
won't. They won't. But who knows what could happen? I mean, I don't know. I can't promise they'll never get together.
We can almost promise that.
I mean, it'd be an incredible ending to the story. But anyway, they're not together. It's not important.
Well, not for their respective partners, but yes.
If anyone listening, if there's, can you imagine if there's still people listening who aren't expecting a thank you? That'd be incredible.
To the Resilience Project for the ongoing support and sponsorship, we really appreciate you. And Ben, for your guidance throughout as well. Thank you so much. To all our guests that have appeared this year on the podcast, it has been such a special year. And I just, like the amount of times we finish an episode and take off the headphones and we've just fallen in love with a new person and their story and their bravery. We thank you so much for sharing your stories from the heart. To our partners.
Thank you for editing the show. Oh, no, that's just my partner.
Jamison's getting a double.
Good for her.
To our partners who sacrifice a lot, they support so much. They're such big, well, I was going to say fans, but I don't mean that like they're not fans of ours, but they're fans of the show. Well, they are fans of ours, but they're also, they're just such wonderful supporters, and we're away a lot and we worked very hard on this, and they're so supportive of that. So I was writing this with my Apple pen and it auto-corrected every one of their names. So instead of Jamison, it called her Jane's On. So well done to Jane's On. Penny, got Penny right. It called Sophie Cy. And it called Bridges' partner Tambo Rambo. So to Rambo, Cy, Jane's On, and Penny, we thank you so much for your incredible support. And to Bridge, well, it feels weird thank you now because you're like, it's the four of us. So so you don't get a thanks.
So actually, no, we should be clear about that. And no thank you. No thank you, Bridge. No thanks.
Well, we're not thanking ourselves, so it's the four of us. So
Yeah, true.
you don't get a thanks this year, Bridge.
No, absolutely no thank you, Bridge, for keeping this show on the road and making it actually happen every week. Definitely no thank you.
And for the amount of hard work that you do, the countless hours.
No thanks.
There is no thanks.
No thanks.
Because it's the four of us.
Yeah.
And finally, to the listeners, this show would be nothing without you. We love you so much. Your support is incredible. The love we get from you guys is just something else. So thank you so much. We hope you all have a very safe and healthy and happy holiday.
The Imperfects is hosted and produced by Hugh Van Cuylenberg, Ryan Shelton, and Josh Van Cuylenberg. Our executive producer is Bridget Northeast. This episode was filmed by Andy Poole and edited by Jamison Moore.